you can do this mindset, which for some people, myself included, is incompatible with a powerless mindset. And that's not to tick off anyone who is in AA. I've actually found that a lot of people in AA just have nutrient therapy as a missing link that once they fill in, they can better work that program.
So let's kick this off. Welcome, everybody. It's Katie with Ria Health, and today I am here with Chris Scott. Chris is the founder at Fit Recovery, the author of Drinking Sucks, and also the co-host of the Elevation Recovery podcast with Matt Finch. Just want to say welcome, Chris. Thank you for taking time to meet with me today.
Thanks, Katie. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I was just telling you before we hit record that so many people like over the last few months have been like, you need to talk to Chris at Fit Recovery. I just keep hearing your name and Fit Recovery pop up. So I'm really happy we're finally having a chance to talk. And I want to just jump right into it and ask you to tell us, what is Fit Recovery?
Sure. So Fit Recovery started as a humble little blog in 2014, which is when I quit drinking. And I let my drinking get very bad, which I'm sure we can get into if we want. I had to medically detox and go to inpatient rehab. I did the 12 steps. I did a bunch of holistic therapies, I guess you could say. Nothing worked for me really until I found the combination of regular exercise, which I had done when I was drinking, but which took on a whole new significance and efficacy post-alcohol, and nutrient repair, which is little known, or at least then it was very little known. Now it seems to be increasingly popular, but the use of targeted nutrients, amino acids, good fats or fatty acids, minerals, vitamins, etc., and even herbs to repair the body and get your neurotransmitters and hormones and nutrient levels back up to where they need to be for you to have a baseline sense of well-being. So I found that I stopped white knuckling when I started using nutrient repair. And so I kind of stayed on that theme for a few years. I wrote like 200 articles for that site. I teamed up with Matt Finch, who, as you said, is my co-host for Elevation Recovery. And we just kind of found each other online because he had the same story of recovery in terms of methodology that I had from alcohol, even though our past addictions were quite different. He was on heroin and various opiates, meth, God knows what, every single pill known to man. I was very strict alcohol-based, so I was on an alcohol-based diet, I guess you could say, for about 10 years before Fit Recovery. And so then we started, thinking about what goes into recovery. What are some other missing links here? So it really branches out beyond just the nutrient therapy. We use what we call the hierarchy of recovery, which is the biochemical, psychological, social, and spiritual pillars. And we find that when people work their way through those pillars, beginning with stabilizing their biochemistry, there's a certain synergy with any other approach that they take, whether it's AA, whether it's the Sinclair method or medication-assisted treatment, or any other holistic method. I've had people use yoga successfully, but most often what they're doing, if they use yoga, if they think they're using yoga primarily to further their recovery, they're also creating a synergy with nutrient repair, with psychological reframing techniques, with forging a new identity beyond alcohol, and really getting excited about life beyond alcohol and crowding alcohol off of the priority list such that it goes from number 1 to number 100 and falls off. And so that's kind of the approach. It's a different approach. Fortunately, it seems to be consistent with the zeitgeist at this point. We have a lot of people talking about, gut health or the gut-brain connection or the importance of amino acids. And yet there seems to have been this wall constructed around the recovery community in which these things didn't permeate, which are really good ideas. And yet in some circles, the more fanatical ones, I've found that it's almost like blasphemy to suggest that there's anything that can help besides their particular strict methodologies. So we advocate for an open-ended approach. And that's kind of what Fit Recovery is. And my book, Drinking Sucks, which you mentioned, I wrote at about 3 years alcohol-free. I had some of the answers then. And since then, I presented a bunch of different solutions that have worked for me and others in my course, Total Alcohol Recovery 2.0. And we also offer private coaching.
Very cool. Yeah, I have so many questions I want to unpack with what you just said, but I want to back up a little bit and ask, can you tell us a little bit about then your recovery story from alcohol addiction and what it was like using these tools you've mentioned that are part of the Fit Recovery program now?
Sure. So I had a pretty high level of resolve to quit back in 2014. I had lost my girlfriend of 3 years who I intended to marry. I'd lost my job. That was kind of a mutual parting, but alcohol played a role for sure, if only in my perception of what that job entailed and my inability to do that job to my best potential. And I was fed up. I had embarrassed myself. I made a bunch of phone calls to my best friends and family, which was a great thing to do. But, it's tough to totally surrender, which is what I did at that point, and say, look, I have a problem. This is the biggest thing in my life now. I'm going to lose everything. And then just the intense uncertainty of what happens next. Fear and anger, fear of what would happen if I relapsed, and anger at alcohol for doing these things to me kept me going for several months. And it kept me going through the inpatient rehab where I went to, where people actually would escape all the time and go to a gas station, buy liquor. Like I didn't know if that would happen to me, but I kind of held strong. I realized at some point that I was kind of white knuckling because I was just fighting. I realized I had a limited amount of willpower. And I kept hearing, when you stop fighting, then you can recover. But I didn't know if I would be able to stop fighting. So I started looking for other tools. And, I'd been drinking up to a handle of vodka a day before I quit. And when the doctor saw me in the rehab center, he said, you have the liver of a 68-year-old man who's been drinking, like, this is not good. This is a bad case. So for me, I'm sure that I had insane nutrient deficiencies. I had insane biochemical imbalances. If you did a brain scan, you probably would have found a lot wrong. You could have maybe diagnosed me with bipolar or all sorts of different things. That's just speculation. I don't know. But fortunately, because I decided to get back in shape, I started using some amino acids. L-glutamine was one of them. And I realized that my alcohol cravings were lessened just a little bit. I wasn't using enough, I now know in retrospect, to be clinically effective at eliminating alcohol cravings with that one supplement. And there are many more. But it started me on this journey, and I started reading books. I started reading Julia Ross's books, The Mood Cure, The Craving Cure. I'm sorry, The Mood Cure and The Diet Cure back then. The Craving Cure is my most recent one. I read Joan Matthews Larson's 7 Weeks to Sobriety. I picked up Dr. Kenneth Blum's Alcohol and the Addicted Brain. And I started reading. And because reading was actually a strategy for me to go to sleep. I'd always had insomnia, didn't really kick it just by quitting drinking, but I had to read before I went to bed. People were always like, how do you have these many books? I said, it's not because I'm disciplined. I just can't sleep if I don't read. So that ended up being a benefit in disguise. And so finally it occurred to me, like, I need to just start like doing trial and error with these nutrients. In the course of a few months, I improved my mood and I stopped craving alcohol, and I found that I had better energy levels and better sleep. And so, as I say, optimization never ends. To this day, I still have swings. I'll be, I'm potentially right now considering doing keto or carnivore just for a while, just to see how it goes. But even though optimization never ends, I'm light years away and better than what I was at that point in time. And so, these tools were, I knew they were science-based. I had read studies going back to the 50s. I think there is a study in the 50s showing that L-glutamine, in conjunction with some other amino acids that I talked about on Fit Recovery, helped to ease withdrawal symptoms for alcoholics. It was a small sample size, but this has been replicated. We don't have any massive, big pharma-funded, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies on this for obvious reasons. We probably won't. But as I said, it seems to be the zeitgeist is catching up with this. So, I increasingly had confidence in these tools, and I started writing about them, doing some one-on-one coaching carefully with clients, and always saying, look, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. This helped me. Let's see if it helps you. And one by one, people started to get better. Just, buying some basic stuff, maybe changing their diet a little bit, maybe eating less sugar, trying to get a little more sleep. And so those are the core tools, at least for early recovery and defeating cravings, this nutrient-based approach. And it does seem to work best with an empowered mindset. You can do this mindset, which for some people, myself included, is incompatible with a powerless mindset. And that's not to tick off anyone who is in AA. I've actually found that a lot of people in AA just have nutrient therapy as a missing link that once they fill in, they can better work that program. But different things, at least in the psychological pillar, I find different approaches work for different people. And it is tricky to use these biochemical tools too, because different supplements work for different people due to something called biochemical individuality. So one person might respond really well to one amino acid or one mineral, and another person might not. I took magnesium. There's another example, about 200 to 500 milligrams for a few months after, maybe I probably discovered that 2 months after I quit. And that was the first step to me resolving my horrible insomnia.
Wow.
And yet for other people, some people take magnesium and they get itchy or agitated. So, magnesium is something that most people tend to be deficient in, and most people do respond well to with supplementation, but not everything works the same way for everyone. So my hope, and something I'm working on going forwards, is to have a individualized testing system that, at least with a higher degree of confidence, gives people a regimen of things that they can use to hopefully help biohack their way through early recovery, through the cravings. And then over time, people ask me a lot, like, do you still use these tools? Are you taking like 1 million supplements every day? The answer is no, although I did increase my supplement intake after the pandemic outbreak just to boost my immunity, because one of the unintended positive side effects of doing this is that you learn a lot about which nutrients do what and about your own body. So I knew what to take to hopefully keep myself healthy. Knock on wood, it seems to have helped. But no, I don't take all of the supplements at the same dosages or even the same selection of supplements that I did back then. It's different depending on what I'm doing in this phase. And right now it's more like trying to keep a fine-tuned machine running rather than just getting basic energy so I can get up and do stuff.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So would you say that most people, if they've had, a long period of time with alcohol use disorder, that they are likely deficient in nutrients if they haven't been supplementing or eating very clean?
For sure. Yeah. These nutrient deficiencies don't tend to go away. To give you an idea of how much glutamine you would need from natural food in order to quash alcohol cravings in early recovery, you'd have to eat between 10 and 20 steaks. So typically I've had people take as much as 20 to 25 grams of L-glutamine to find their sweet spot for ridding themselves of alcohol cravings. Now, people might be wondering, what the hell is L-glutamine? What does it even do? So just as a quick aside, L-glutamine can help it's a precursor for GABA, so it can help with relaxation. GABA is the primary calming neurotransmitter in your brain. So L-glutamine, vitamin B6, and magnesium all help to restore GABA levels. It also helps to repair the gut. So a lot of people have leaky gut that can linger for years after quitting drinking. L-glutamine goes into the digestive tract and can help increase the stability of the wall, so you absorb other nutrients better. And it can also be converted into glucose in the brain without causing a corresponding insulin spike. So unlike eating lots of cookies and ice cream, and I actually in inpatient rehab, I was drinking like 1 or 2 liters of soda every day for about 2 weeks, and then I would crash and feel horrible. Once I found L-glutamine, I was able to switch almost seamlessly to LaCroix or whatever the other sparkling water beverages. I don't know if we had Zevia yet. At some point I found Zevia and I like that. That's stevia sweetened soda.
Okay.
So yeah, there are multiple things that need to be addressed. That's just one, nutrient and a range of things that can be helped with it. Of course, keeping in mind biochemical individuality. There are 15 to 30 different nutrients that are like basic nutrients that people can do trial and error with for biochemical repair. I've had people join my online course who have been, ostensibly sober for 2 years, or they've not drank. However, they still have post-acute withdrawal. Post-acute withdrawal can typically, it's said, it can last for up to a year while your brain rewires after you quit an addiction. The problem is it can actually last much longer. The primary symptoms of post-acute withdrawal include anxiety, insomnia, and depression. And anhedonia is a big one. That means pleasure deafness. So lack of motivation. That's caused most often by endorphin deficiency, which can be helped with supplementing with DL-phenylalanine, particularly the D-phenylalanine, which helps to increase natural endorphin levels. So yeah, there are a bunch of different things that can help people, even if they quit a long time ago, if they still struggle with these maladies that they might not recognize result from drinking. And I'll just say real quick that I quit hundreds of times before I finally quit. I often say I failed hundreds of times and I only succeeded once, and that was the last time I succeeded. So that's the good news. But in all of those attempts to quit, the reason I didn't stay quit was that I had either intense anxiety, depression, or insomnia that brought me back to alcohol. And if I had known that there was a way besides alcohol to put an end to those things, even if it would have taken a few months, I think I would have waited and tried to see if, it would have kept me going a little bit longer, knowing that my entire life wouldn't consist of white knuckling forever.
So the white knuckling piece is a common challenge I hear from people who come to medication therapy like you. They've quit dozens of times or attempted, myself included, and just nothing ever stuck because yeah, those tough emotions surface and then those cravings for alcohol are also very present. So it's really easy to go back to this old friend alcohol that's going to, meet your need real quick. So what about the alcohol craving piece of it? Like, say that's someone's like immediate challenge. They just have those obsessive thoughts every day. Are there like a few key supplements you would say that this is what you could use or try out? Of course, knowing that everyone's different and everyone responds differently. That's just such a common complaint I hear from people.
Yeah, so L-glutamine is definitely one of those supplements. And B vitamins for sure. I think that's even in the mainstream. If you go to the hospital with alcohol withdrawal, they'll usually give you a shot or oral thiamine, which is vitamin B1. That tends to be really deficient in people, and chronic deficiency in B1, you can end up with something called wet brain, where basically it's a behavioral, potentially permanent problem. So yeah, B vitamins for sure, a potent multivitamin. I love the brand Legion Triumph. I actually don't have an affiliation with them, but I told so many people about that multivitamin that company wrote me a letter a few years ago, an email, and they said, we didn't know that this could be used to help people with drinking problems, but apparently it can. Thank you for spreading the word.
Awesome, I love it.
Yeah, and I guess people were just writing them saying this particular multivitamin helped. There have been some studies on different multivitamins. Some of them don't absorb well, and that's actually an understatement. So there are a lot of crappy supplements out there, which makes it hard. And brands are important. That's another unfortunate reason that trial and error is so important. So there are a few key brands that I like. I really like Pure Encapsulations. I really like Now brand even. They tend to be the most economical and pretty well made. You can often get like bulk amino acids, like powders like taurine or glycine, which are also really good for relaxation if anxiety is your issue. From Now, L-glutamine from Now is good. I have a supplement company called BioRebalance, and we are currently out of stock, unfortunately, for a number of reasons. Well, demand's one, but also there is a national lid shortage of the color of lid that we had just selected. Yes.
That would be the last thing I would have expected you to say.
So anyway, that's out of stock. Should be back in a few weeks. And I worked with scientists to create a supplement that I thought would have the highest probability of helping the most people. Of course, we have a 30-day money back guarantee, just because some people will try it and they might not like it. These tend to be pretty benign nutrients, amino acids, vitamins, minerals. It's really hard to, unless you're on certain medications, most notably SSRI, I should mention, you don't want to take serotonin boosters or precursors like L-tryptophan, 5-HTP, or SAMe if you're taking an SSRI. BioRebalance does have those in it. So we don't recommend people on SSRIs or SNRIs to take that. But with that said, these tend to be pretty benign things for most people to experiment with. It would be amazing if we had some AI algorithm that would take your genetic data, and your blood tests and maybe neurotransmitter tests and figure out exactly what you need, but we're not quite there yet. So yeah, I would say look into L-glutamine, look into a potent multivitamin like Legion Triumph. If you struggle with anxiety, look into taurine and glycine. and look into BioRebalance if you want to give it a try. And if it doesn't work for you, you get your money back.
That's awesome. That's such great information. Um, I'm curious, like, have you worked with people who maybe they're still drinking today and they want to quit, but they're kind of going through that loop that we've all been through where it's like we're quitting and then we're back at it? If someone who's currently drinking today just started by adding in some supplements, have you seen that help people to kind of titrate their drinking levels down?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And that's something I wondered about for a while because I couldn't find any studies on it in early recovery when I was in early recovery. And I had quit before I started using any of these things, really. I mean, I think I knew about milk thistle when I was in my 20s. I would take that and I would take one, I'd be like, I'm not going to get liver damage now because I took milk thistle and then I'd drink a fifth of vodka
Yeah.
more. And I'd wake up the next day and my abdomen would be hurting. So yeah, there's no miracle cure for quitting drinking. I want to say that first. It's not something where you can biohack your alcohol addiction and maintain your addiction and just use nutrients to keep plugging in the mess. It's not going to work. Typically, people have to commit to a taper regimen where they taper off alcohol, or maybe they go medically detox if they're like I was, or maybe their doctor gives them a script for benzodiazepines. All of those things are important. Luckily, benzodiazepines don't seem to interact with these nutrients. So I have seen since that time, a lot of people use the nutrients that I've mentioned in order to kind of build up their systems before they quit. Now they are flushing some out because alcohol is a diuretic, and especially water-soluble nutrients like B vitamins and magnesium and vitamin C, et cetera, will get flushed out to some degree, but at least you get the benefit of some of it. And even psychologically, I've had people in my course or private clients that we've had at Fit Recovery, it's a good way to motivate them by saying, look, you're spending all this money on supplements and alcohol, and the alcohol is making you waste some of those supplements because you're peeing them out or you're not absorbing them. So, let's continue the taper. But people do seem to feel a little bit better often, not always, but often if they start supplementation before quitting drinking. It can help increase the resilience. And I think, even though I don't have a giant study to cite for that, that's more anecdotal, you do see the rise of these hangover cure supplements. There are a couple on the market. Some of them don't have impressive ingredients and it's all marketing, but others do. There's a particular compound called DHM, which is, I think, extracted from the Oriental raisin tree, but it's been found to detoxify alcohol to some extent in the body and to keep alcohol from binding to GABA receptors. There's another nutrient called kudzu root that's been used for thousands of years in China that can, through mechanisms that are a little more complicated, help people drink less and in the short term, and can be used as part of a taper. So, I want to say all that, take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of people have gotten really excited and then they take those hangover cure stuff and kudzu and they expect that they'll magically quit. You still do need some motivation to stick to a taper and accountability and support. It's not a miracle, but it can help. And, to the extent that you're detoxifying your liver, even with things like milk thistle, it can help you to feel less bad the next day. And if that's the case, maybe you sleep a little bit better, maybe you get the motivation that you need, that marginal amount that you need in order to get to the next level of quitting.
Yeah. And I want to go back a little bit because you talked about how when you were in traditional recovery before all of this, that you were like downing a bunch of sugary soda. So I hear also the sugar cravings when even when people are reducing their drinking using the Sinclair method and they're kind of titrating down. So I know you mentioned some supplements to address that, but could you kind of restate that again, just things for people who may be turning to like candy and things while they're reducing or stopping drinking, and what would be best to address that?
L-glutamine is a big one.
Keep going, but that seems like the magical one.
That was a miracle supplement for me. Now, on its own, it might not necessarily be enough. And there are really complex mechanisms through which all of this worked. So as I said, to restore GABA levels in order to feel relaxed, which might have an indirect effect on what you're consuming. Maybe you're eating sugar because you can't relax in part. You need B6 and magnesium as well. There could be other nutrients that come together. I think they found that chromium supplementation, which is in a lot of good multivitamins, can help to reduce sugar cravings as well. And just diet is actually a big part of it too. So if you're eating enough protein and good fats, then you're less likely to have intense sugar cravings. But I found that, and switching to complex carbs also can help. A lot of people ask if they should go to the keto diet or something extreme like the carnivore diet. I'm not against any of those things, but it seems like in early recovery, start out with basic supplements. If you have a massive sweet tooth, maybe increase the L-glutamine, make sure you're getting some chromium, and make sure you're not pounding sugar all the time, or try to taper down on the sugar. I found that switching to complex carbohydrates was a necessary first step before I got to a point where I could do fasting, which has its own benefits, and that's a different topic, or to where I could eat mostly good fats and protein and feel satiated without getting hangry. I haven't been hangry in a long time, and I think that's because I'm no longer carb addicted. A lot of people are carb addicted. I do eat some carbs. Presently, I have sourdough bread occasionally. I like sprouted Ezekiel bread. I try to stay away from American grains because they have so much gluten and gliadin and glyphosate, potentially the pesticide. I don't want to ruin my gut health. So making common sense diet changes and educating yourself about how to keep your blood sugar stable can really help. And also getting enough sleep. At least in the beginning, I thought of my recovery. Once I found these nutrients that helped so much, I went from, feeling 20% of how I should feel to like 60% with the nutrients alone. I started thinking it's all about which pills I take, but lifestyle is just as important. Exercise and sleep and getting sun, walking barefoot sometimes outside, getting fresh air. All of those things can be important in hormonal regulation. And as I found with alcohol recovery and fat loss and muscle building and just mood optimization, the most important thing seems to be hormonal optimization, which is a holistic phenomenon, rather than just figuring out which nutrients I need to plug into my body.
That's so interesting. And I know sleep is also a big issue people in recovery deal with. And I know you've listed a number of supplements to help with that. But as you said, if people are piling on these supplements, but eating McDonald's and chips every day, like it's only going to do so much, I imagine. So they need the nutrients. And when you say complex carbs, what do you mean by that exactly? Just some examples for people.
Sure. So a complex carb would take a little longer to digest than a simple carb. So your tablespoon of sugar in your coffee, that's classic simple carb. If you were to have sprouted bread, that would be a complex carb, or even a sweet potato would be a complex carb. So typically carbs that release sugar into your bloodstream slower tend to be better, because you don't end up with this blood sugar high and then blood sugar crash.
That makes sense. So in your program and the course that you offer, like what have you seen with people who are able to apply these tools in their own recovery journey? Like, do you have a couple anecdotal stories or examples you want to share with us?
I think we've had well over 1,000, maybe approaching 1,500 or 2,000 people who have gone through that course since I started it years ago. And there are a lot of, I'm trying to figure out where to begin with the anecdotal stories. We have some really inspiring stories. People who started out in a spot where even I was pessimistic. I'm a born optimist. I'm irrationally optimistic, which is also a trait that I partially attribute my getting from where I was to where I am now. But I looked at their situations. I was like, there's almost no way. Like, this isn't good. We had someone in the Middle East, in a country, I think he was in Jordan, who had lost his job. He was a Christian, also in a Muslim country. I think he had been engaged to a lady who broke off the engagement as soon as she found out that he was drinking. He was drinking a liter of vodka a day, and he didn't know anyone. His parents disowned him too when they found out about him. And to add to that, most of the supplements I talked about were not available or were illegal in his country. So, and he said he had spent the last money he had on trying to get better with Fit Recovery. So I had I had trouble sleeping that night. And as it turned out, the only person he knew who would talk to him was a shopkeeper across the street. So encouraged him to go talk to that shopkeeper. He he had a shower with cold water. He used cold showers to beat anxiety. He had a friend who went to Malta or somewhere in the Mediterranean to come back with CBD and other nutrients that he couldn't get. He found somehow some bodybuilding shops in Jordan where he was able to get like glutamine and some other things and vitamins. And I mean, he's going into debt at this point, just doing push-ups to get motivated, taking cold showers, and using the CBD once he got it. CBD is an amazing nutrient. There's a lot of hype about it, obviously, but that can be helpful for a lot of people for alcohol cravings because it's so good at reducing inflammation. And there's some speculation that alcohol cravings could be due in part to neuroinflammation, which CBD can reduce. So he used that. And over time, he just pulled himself out. And we heard from him several months after he had joined the course. And apparently he had gotten a new job and he was flying to Europe for a business trip. And he had rebuilt his life.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's one of my favorite anecdotes. But we've had a lot of people come in with goals that I didn't even necessarily think of when I designed the course. We've had people come in and say that their marriages are falling apart, that they feel they're very religious and they feel distant from God. And amazingly, it seems that when you address this seemingly dry subject matter, like learning about nutrients, it seems to be the first step towards getting better so that you can fix the rest of your life. So with that, whatever stability you get in early recovery from using these methods, you ultimately, I guess it makes sense because you increase your energy levels, you sleep better, you become the person that you were born to be. And that's really the goal.
Absolutely. That's such an awesome story you shared. And I want to talk or ask you about like that internal motivation, because I know you've mentioned it. And obviously the example of the gentleman in Jordan, he was very motivated to fix this problem. What about the people who want it? Like they do want it, but perhaps it's more from external pressure or they feel obligated that they need to fix this. How do you work with those people, or what do you say to people who may be motivated, but maybe not enough to do what it takes to really implement these changes in their life?
Yeah, so I would say, even though we have a really good success rate with the course and fit recovery generally, part of that's due to self-selection bias, because most people who find us and sign up and want to work with us are really motivated. I'll say I have less success with people that aren't motivated. Some of the saddest emails I get are from like parents who want their children to take the course. You can't force someone to read something on a computer. You can't force someone to take capsules, especially it might seem bizarre to them if they don't understand why they're doing it. And so that's tough, with a virtual support group and everything being online. The good news is we've been able to help a lot of people over the course of this pandemic when they might otherwise be hesitant about going to a physical treatment center. And of course, we know that a lot of treatment centers don't offer this approach anyway. I went to a very expensive one myself and came out and still needed to find this information. So we have been able to reach people, but they are largely self-motivated. We do get people who are kind of on the fence, I'll say. So it's not common for people to join and be 100% sure that they want to quit. But as long as they have enough curiosity to learn about the information, keep an open mind, see if they want to move forward, a lot of them choose to do it. And they read the comments in our private Facebook group, or they sometimes become friends or support partners with other people there. And they feel inspired and they go, all right, let's try for a week. Let's see if I can't take supplements and try to fix some things. And then they're on a whole nother plane several weeks after that. So yeah, we do. I don't want to, say that everyone has to be 100% done with alcohol. Don't even miss it. I'm ready to change 100%. That's not the case. I mean, it wasn't the case for me. There was still a little devil lurking on my shoulder when I was 2 months alcohol free, saying like, you could just go to a bar.
Yeah.
And of course that devil died and fell off my shoulder and I haven't seen him since, but that's very common. People can struggle with that for some time. And that's why we emphasize the biopsychosocial spiritual approach, because once all those pillars are optimized, then you get to a level where you don't miss alcohol anymore. You've transcended it. And it takes a lot of work to optimize them. But for a lot of people in our course, they say it's the most fun thing and rewarding thing they've ever done, maybe the hardest, but definitely it infuses meaning into their lives. And I don't think that true happiness is possible if you don't have meaning in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, just thinking back on my own recovery journey, like I didn't know how sick I felt until I started to feel better. And I think that's so true for a lot of people, where it's like you don't realize that living in a fog and an alcohol hangover on a regular basis, like just how much exponentially better you can feel. And I imagine that has to be true, obviously, with getting the right nutrients and exercise and sleep and all of those things.
Oh yeah, there's something called baseline resetting, which is a term I learned from a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, PhD, a really good book. That's like my Bible of sleep.
Oh,
And he talks about it in the context of sleep. So we have all these people that get, 5, maybe even 4 or 3 hours of sleep every night, and they think it's normal to feel pretty bad a lot of the time, or they don't even know that they feel bad because it's their, that's the status quo of their life. You don't really notice absolute levels of anything. You notice changes day to day or week to week. So if you're chronically stuck in something, you don't realize that you're actually in a pretty bad state in absolute terms, but you do realize it once you get better and you fix it. I think the same concept applies to alcohol recovery. I also had a weird phenomenon where I assumed that everyone else drank way more than they did just because I did. And it got to the point where I would leave I worked in finance. I would leave the office if it rained so I could go to a bar and have a drink. And I literally thought that most people drank when it rained, because why wouldn't you drink? It's rainy, it kind of sucks outside. You should probably go have a beer and then come back to work. It's insanity.
oh man, it so is. And same for me. Like I assumed a lot of people drank more than they did. Like it's Saturday afternoon. Why wouldn't you want to go for a glass of wine? People be like, I don't want to drink right now. I'm like, really?
Everyone has mimosas most mornings, I
Right.
thought.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's so funny. So okay, I want to ask you about exercise because I know that's a big aspect of what you teach about and offer guidance for in your program. So how important is that? And say someone is a total couch potato and not doing any exercise, where do they start? Because I know that requires a certain level of motivation as well.
Yeah. And I'll say my first workouts after I quit were very light because I was in a bad spot. I was actually still tapering off of benzodiazepines in the detox when I was allowed to go to this gym. It was kind of like a crappy hotel gym. And but they had a elliptical and they had a treadmill and they had some machines and maybe some dumbbells that went up to 20 pounds or something. And I literally, my first workout was probably like 4.5 minutes on the elliptical. And then I threw in the towel and I probably went back to lay in my bed. So, and I built it up to a year from that point. I was doing like 10 sets of 10 deadlifts with 405 pounds and maybe a minute or two of rest in between. I was in the best shape of my life. So you can get to a really good spot, but be easy on yourself in the beginning. You're not going to go from alcohol addicted couch potato, which I basically was, even though I did work out. I had pathetic workouts. Even my friends still, at this point, laugh about some of my later drinking career workouts where we would get together, go to the gym, they'd do an hour workout. I was kind of big, so I had like muscle mass. I would do like 1 rep on the bench press and start sweating and then go sit down in the corner while they finished their workout. So I was not in a great spot. I thought like being able to do 1 rep that was more than they could do was, I'd won. But I did not have endurance. Alcohol had just stripped me of my electrolytes chronically. And I was out of breath most of the time. And of course, if it was the morning or by the end, if it was any time and I wasn't drinking, I was having withdrawal. So my hands were shaking and I didn't want to do anything too intense. So you want to get back into things slowly. I have a quick little routine that worked for me in early recovery. That's just a body weight routine. I liked the term from AA, or the phrase, "this too shall pass." So I made what I called the pass routine, which for me was push-ups or planks, just until I felt tired, like not trying to kill myself, but push-ups or planks, air squats, some stretching, which was just like, for me, down dog and some yoga hip openers, and then serenity, which was deep breaths through my nose. I didn't know why I liked doing deep breaths through my nose. I don't know why I associated that with serenity, but I later read a book on breathing. It turns out it's better to breathe through your nose. So I might have been onto something, but a lot of people, it's the strangest, most surreal thing to me now that probably hundreds or thousands of people have used the PASS routine now in early recovery to just get themselves into a different state. You know, the best way, I think Tony Robbins said, to change your state, you need to change your physiology. So a quick little workout can be really synergistic with whatever supplements you're taking. And of course, whatever psychological counseling or program you're working. You know, we all know what it's like in early recovery to feel like you're trapped and you need to get out. And, you know, this isn't acceptable. Usually we go, all right, drink. But what if you could instead hold a plank for a minute and then do a couple air squats and then do some yoga stretches and then breathe through your nose for, you know, take 10 seconds of breath. That workout can last for 4 or 5 minutes, but you can be in a different mental and physiological state when you're done.
Yeah.
And so over time, I recommend, you know, adding intensity gradually and doing what you can do. To this day, I use Google Calendar to plan my workouts and basically my whole life. I don't do what I used to do, which is have a 2,000-word description of the workout I'm going to do inside of that note. Instead, I just write gym. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do once I'm there. Now, that might not work for people who have never been to a gym, and there are people who are very new to fitness. In that case, I say it's best to hire a trainer or work out with a buddy who knows what they're doing, and then they can teach you some things, but you don't need to push yourself to 100%, especially in early recovery. And to this day, I find that if I show up to the gym and my only goal is to just get a sweat, and that's one of my mottos, I say it all the time in my course, a sweat a day. If you can get a sweat a day, it doesn't matter if you go in the sauna or the steam room or you hold a plank or you go for a power walk. Like if you get a sweat a day, you'll be changing your physiology and creating this, you know, positive feedback loop where you feel better when you exercise. So you'll be more likely to exercise later. And then you can kind of intuitively ramp up the intensity with time. So when I go now to just get a sweat, sometimes if I'm really sleep deprived, which doesn't happen often, but sometimes I'll only do 15 minutes on the stair stepper, which is now my favorite workout machine. Or I might get a little endorphin boost and decide to go do some weights or hit the heavy bag. So I like to keep things intuitive. I don't like to put pressure on myself. In some ways I do, but at that point in my life, it would have been a bad idea for me to have a schedule filled with workouts and break down and say, I can't do this, because then I could have been at risk of potential relapse.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Like, I know in my own experience, and I see it with others as well, that like they get so psyched about recovery and okay, this is the change I'm going to make. And then you just like create this whole mountain that you have to climb. Whereas like starting small is so much more sustainable and effective, because you reach burnout eventually when you try to do too much change all at once. At least that's what I found.
For sure. Yeah, I found emphasizing discipline with the small basic things is best, because then you don't dilute your discipline. You're not thinking about whether you're going to have the discipline to finish your pyramid set or whatever. You're just thinking about whether you can make it to the gym. And so I think you can restore your trust in your ability to do things and commit to things if you keep it simple and say, I'm going to go to the gym. If you really can't finish a workout once you get there, there could be a physiological reason for it. So yeah, it's best to take it easy, restore your discipline slowly over time, and focus on the things that matter rather than the miscellaneous details of things that you may or may not do.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's so many questions I could keep asking you, but I do have one kind of random curiosity, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I know, like for myself and as others gain hindsight from their alcohol addiction, as it gets more and more in the past, like I personally view it as this kind of great deception, this veil that was over me, that I thought I needed it. It was my crutch that I really depended on, and it made everything fun. Like you said, you go to the bar on a rainy day. Doesn't everyone do that? But the more distance I got from it, the more I realized, oh my gosh, that was such a trap that was deceiving me and just keeping me stuck there. I'm curious what, I guess, learnings or hindsight you have, what perspective you have on your alcohol addiction now that you're years removed from it, that might speak to others who are, you know, in the thick of it and thinking like, how the heck am I going to get out of here? What would you say there?
I progressed through different phases of alcohol addiction. I was a different type of drinker at different phases of my life. At one point, I was a binge drinker. At one point, I was a self-styled wine connoisseur. At another point, I was just almost a brown paper bag alcoholic who would who would want to sip it as soon as I left the liquor store in the morning. And so and of course, the whole thing was getting progressively worse the whole time. It seems to depend how trapped you actually are by the substance, seems to depend where you are in that spectrum. And some people, for whatever reasons, end up arrested at a certain point on that spectrum. And so I've had clients or course members who have been drinking 3 glasses of wine for 30 years every day. They don't get worse, but they don't feel good. And even for them, alcohol becomes what I call an exhausted resource. So, and that's a term from NLP, or neuro linguistic programming. It's basically, it's something that used to help you. You want to be honest about the fact that you got some benefit from alcohol at one point. Drinking was a blast in college at some point. It wasn't necessarily productive. You're still damaging your liver. You're still toxifying your brain, but maybe you could handle it then. Maybe you didn't know that you had some genetic or biochemical or trauma-induced predisposition for developing an addiction. But over time, it became something that the pros clearly no longer outweighed the cons. And for me, by the time I was like late stage alcoholism, I guess alcohol addiction, I was physiologically trapped. I really was trapped. I did need it, because if I didn't, I knew what would happen. My hands would shake, I would get cold sweats, and I was at risk of having a seizure. So, some people do need alcohol in that sense. That doesn't mean that there's not a way out. Luckily, you can use medications, you can use nutrients. And as I want to emphasize, if you get to the point where I was, where you're at risk of severe withdrawal, that can be potentially fatal. You want to get medications and then think about the nutrients after that. So whatever amount of trapped you are, that's a physiological phenomenon. The psychological aspect of thinking you need alcohol to be your friend, or thinking you need it to be your life partner, or that you'll always need it, or that in order to go to a wedding or go to sleep or release stress or take the edge off, is my favorite. In order to do those things, you'll always need a drink. That's a lie, and that's a deception. So once you get rid of the physiological bonds that alcohol has you in, you can then seek to address that lie. That's one reason I wrote the book Drinking Sucks. It was kind of it's somewhat of a memoir. It's very short, but one of my biggest goals with that book was to help people reframe alcohol as the toxic substance it is, so that it can become a moot substance for them, an exhausted resource, and something that they look back on and they see it as they see drinking generally as an activity, as silly and puny and ridiculous compared to all of the things that they now have to do. So you do want to get to a point where, you wake up in the morning and you see all of these possibilities, things you can do. And that crowds out alcohol from your list of possible things to do. And I do think that ultimately, in a psychological sense, it's always a lie and a deception that you need alcohol. If you have those physiological chains, then those need to be broken using, scientific methods. But yeah, it's very, very important to address the cognitive reframing aspect of addiction in early recovery.
Yeah, very helpful. Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today. Where can people find more information about you or your book or your podcast?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kitty. People can find me at fitrecovery.com. There's been some confusion because I used to be fit-recovery.com, and now it's fitrecovery.com. So either way, you'll end up at fitrecovery.com. You can also just Google Fit Recovery. And on there, you can find, there's a menu. You can read blog articles for free. You can go to my YouTube channel, which is also called Fit Recovery. You can listen to the podcast. Actually, the podcast has its own website, and that's elevationrecovery.com. And that's a mix of episodes, me and Matt Finch, or me and a guest, Matt Finch with a guest. We kind of mix it up a bit. And the course is also on fitrecovery.com. It's just I think it's fitrecovery.com/course. And so you can find me there. We have a contact form. If anyone has any questions, we're always happy to see if we can help.
Awesome. Well, it's been so great talking with you. So much good information. Thanks again.
Thank you, Katie. Really appreciate it.